Okay, let's try this recording. I'm not very technological savvy, but Laurel Jason Christensen here. Laurel Thatch Urich made this statement: the general public doesn't particularly care if the story is true or not. They love Betsy Ross and the reputation that the character has assumed over the years. Mrs. Urich is completely correct with this statement, sadly, which is why our job as historians is to not only make the story interesting to the audience, but find ways to tell the truth regarding the characters that we are representing. Make history fun and enjoyable to learn, obviously. As a John Adams reenactor these last 20 years, and as a student of John Adams' works and writings and less teachings and speeches and you name it, he is my mentor in the subjects of history, law, constitutionalism, even his own life, and how to elevate oneself to be better than they are. I found it extremely fitting, being this expert on John Adams' life, to do a brief report on his wife, Abigail Adams, a woman that is liked more than John, quite frankly. In fact, those are reasons why those in fact, Abigail Adams is liked more, due to her intelligence, due to her virtue and wisdom, yes, uh, but mainly because John considered her his ballast. Ballast is a electrical term, but but to help keep him grounded. For example, when John went off on his mistake, and that acknowledged this mistake of his first item of business as Senate President, Vice President, his days as Vice President, proposing the to give the President of the United States a title such as His Highness President of the United States of America. It wasn't technically His Highness, but it was still a title, a nobility, violation of the Constitution, and he just. I understand why John did it, but it was still a mistake. And he announced this mistake, and he learned from his wife that it was a mistake as well. But she kept him grounded. When John was losing his patience with the other members in the Continental Congress, especially the delegate from Pennsylvania, Dickinson, regarding their refusal to declare independence or to support the Massachusetts militia, or later on becoming the Continental Army. Before taking a stand against England before 1776, before they declared it in July 2nd, 1776. She kept him grounded. He always sought counsel from his wife. And George Washington knew this, hence the reason why Washington's own couriers, if not him, he himself, hand delivered John Adams' letters to Abigail and Abigail Adams' letter to her husband. Thomas Jefferson, while in France with Abigail and John, had this to say regarding Abigail Adams: that she was one of the most estimable characters on earth. And yes, to this day, people still think of Abigail this way. In fact, the she fell in, besides the romantic letters, the love letters between each other, she fell in love with John because of his intellect, because he was her equal. Same with John. John fell in love with Abigail because she was his equal because of her intellect. In fact, reading the letters, it's so you could see the wit, the intelligent discourse, the wit between each other. Sometimes the clever remarks with one another. One particular letter, which the modern day feminists like to distort to say that Abigail was this feminist. Um, and to quote where I'm coming from, Abigail said this in that March 31st letter in 1776. The letter known as "Remember the Ladies." Um, and I quote, "I long to hear that you have declared an independency, and by the way, in the new code of laws, which I suppose it will be necessary for you to make, I desire you would remember the ladies and be more generous and favorable to them than your ancestors. Do not put such an unlimited power into the hands of husbands. Remember, all men would be tyrants if they could. In particular, care and attention is not paid to the ladies. We are determined to foment rebellion and will not hold ourselves bound by any laws in which we have no voice or representation." However, I love John's witty remark, and this is where I was going with this. In John's follow-up letter, he says, and I quote, "But your letter was the first intimation that another tribe, more numerous and more powerful than all of us, were grown discontented. This is rather too coarse a compliment, but you are so saucy. I won't blot it out. Depend upon it, we know better than to repeal our masculine systems, although they are in full force. You know they are little more than theory. We dare not exert our power in its full latitude. We are obliged to go fair, not exert our power in its full latitude. We are obliged to go fair. Oh, sorry, reread it. And softly and in practice, you know we are the subjects. We have only the name of masters, and rather than give up this, which would completely subject to us to the despotism of the petticoat, I hope General Washington and all of our brave heroes will fight. I am sure every good politician would plot as long as he would against despotism. Remember, monarchy is aristocracy, oligarchy, or autocracy. A fine story indeed." Yeah, you can tell John was being very, witty, clever, joking. To say us men would never dream of rebelling against our wives because we need our wives for counsel. That's the close relationship John and Abigail had. They were united as one, just like every good husband, and every good wife should be, in love, in wisdom, in counsel. In fact, but I didn't. That was another reason why I mentioned that letter of "Remember the Ladies," because in this letter, Abigail shows her fear of the unknown, saying that she was afraid of the smallpox epidemic that was running amok throughout the land, and her decision to not only for herself to get inoculated with this smallpox disease, deadly disease, but to also inoculate their four little children at home. Um, smallpox was a deadly disease, and this inoculation was very experimental. And and, and you have to understand, Abigail was frightened because in her youth she had very poor health. She had very poor health. She got sick often. She had a weak immune system. But yet, this faithful lady took it upon herself to trust the Lord for health and safety, protection of her family. She made this risky decision for her family to be safe, for smallpox, the and for the, the country as well, the countrymen and women. Very patriotic woman, and our second first lady as well. How many of today society would do this? It's hard to count the people on one hand. And that's the type of character Abigail Adams was, a faithful and loving husband, wife, mother, first lady, patriotic woman of America, a God-fearing woman of America.